So I think I start, and since I'm not starting with a lunch talk right away, people can still join and don't miss anything of this, of my conversation with this very, very impressive person. Hello, everybody on Zoom and also on the YouTube live stream. A very warm welcome to our 8th lunch talk. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Albert Kehrer, and I'm on the board of PROUT at Work. And I'm honored to have Angela Matthes with me today, who agreed to join me for this lunch talk. Hi, Angela. Great to have you here.
Hi, Albert. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
This is very exciting for me because usually I speak in German with Angela, but since we had a lot of people asking if we could do another English lunch talk, we decided to try this in English. So it's very exciting to speak in a different language to you.
Yeah, I hope you don't take this personal, but you usually talk in Bayerisch with me and not in German. But it's
it's German with me.
Yes.
For all of you out there, you realize that we've known each other for quite a while, and I checked my inbox earlier, and it was July 2014 we met for the first time, Angela, and we just had this before we started this lunch talk. It was a few weeks after you're coming out at work, which is very impressive.
That's true. Yeah.
Until recently, Angela was the CEO of Baloise Liechtenstein for 8 years. She also transitioned during this role in 2014. Since the beginning of the year, she started her own business, Be Curious, to focus on innovation and disruption in the area of prevention and protection. As she says, her website will always have a strong human component with a focus on diversity and inclusion. Firstly, because Angela is deeply convinced that the ever faster changing business environment needs teams that have the ability to look at challenges from as many different angles as possible. And secondly, because of her own personal journey. She knows firsthand how much energy can be released in environments where we can all bring our best authentic selves to work. Angela, again, a very, very warm welcome, and thanks for taking your time to have this chat with me.
Thank you.
For the audience, if you come up with any questions, do not hesitate to ask them to us via the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app. We will certainly try to answer them at the end of the session. So let's start. Angela, why is LGBT IQ so important to you?
Well, you actually already gave it a little bit an insight when you make the introduction, because I am part of the community. I'm transgender myself, and I have seen what happened with me when I was finally able to be my authentic self, and I see this is true for everyone who has to hide something, and that is why it is important to me also to contribute to the LGBT IQ community and share this.
I mentioned already that you came out in your role as CEO of Baloise Liechtenstein. When a person in such a senior position, is it more difficult to come out?
I think it's both more difficult and less difficult. For me, it was mentally more difficult, and I think it's a very human thing that we have something called loss aversion. Is because if you have had a career and build a career and then have reached a certain point in your career, you have also the fears of what happens to that career if I come out, and when my employer is not accepting of my decision to transition. So that made me very nervous. But it was also an incentive to prepare myself better for the conversations. It was less difficult, I think, because if you are in a senior management role, you also have experiences with standing in front of people and communicating, or also difficult things, difficult contexts. And that again helped with my approaching this and going to my superiors and talking with them.
And you had were in the lucky position that you had a boss, the CEO of Baloise Group, who supported you in your coming out quite a lot, as far as I remember.
Absolutely. Well, my coming out day, or my coming out, started at Baloise on May 9th. That was a Friday. And on that day, I had 3 conversations. The first one was with the head of HR, who I knew was kind of like an action guy. So if there is something that needs to be solved, I pull up my sleeves and I start and I attack it. And so when I came out to him, he was very accepting, but he immediately said, "Well, can I immediately call you Angela from now on?" But I was sitting there still in my male identity self in front of him, and I told him no, because I want to have conversations with people that I care about in the organization first, and then we can communicate. Because he wanted to like immediately write an intranet news and said, from next Monday on, you can come to work as Angela. And I said, no, I need time. So hold your horses and please give me that time. The second conversation then was with the group CEO of Baloise, which then was Martin Strobel. And I have known him for many years, and I went to him. I had prepared this whole script of how I want to communicate to him, and then after like 2 minutes, he said, "Well, cut to the chase. Like, tell me why you're here." And I told him, and then he like really visibly leaned back in his chair, relaxed, and he looked at me and he said, "Thank you for coming to me and trusting me with this, and trusting Baloise with this. And you will see that you will have the full support of Baloise, and you will have my support in any case." And I think that is the A+ answer you wish you will get if you do that step. And it really was true. I have his full support in the communication and in talking to other people. And then I continued the conversation with him for almost an hour. I showed him photos of what I look like as Angela, and it was really a really amazing, wonderful conversation. And the third one was then with the then chairman of the board of directors of the company I led in Liechtenstein. And he had another reaction, because his first reaction was when I told him, "Pooh, I already thought that you would come here to tell me that you were leaving the company. I'm glad it's not that." And the second reaction was, which also was very nice, because he said, my partner, she had just started a new job about 6 months ago. And he said, last week she came home and she said, "I finally have found the place where I belong at work." And she felt like really like with herself and good with herself. And she said, and he said to me, "And when I listen to you now, I think you just came here and told me that you had found yourself." So that was also a very nice reaction. So I had like three different but very good reactions when I started my coming out at the company. Yeah.
Very touching stories, very touching moments. How did your colleagues react? And also, how did your customers react?
I had, with my colleagues, I made a list, and sometime I had to stop the list because I had about 150 people on that list. And I had a lot of individual conversations. I also had my employees in Liechtenstein. I went to our meeting room and I just made a chair circle and I put myself in the middle of the circle and I told them my story and what was about to happen. And when I had finished talking, it was quiet a moment, and then one of the younger male colleagues said, I know that I'm using the wrong words, but I think it took a lot of balls to say what you just did to us. And then everyone was laughing, which was it was like a really great, nice icebreaker. And then the questions started, and I was able to answer some questions. And then a female employee got up and she said, I have to do something that I have never done before in my life. And she came up to me and said, I have never hugged my CEO. And she just gave me a hug. And that was like the okay for everyone else to get up and come and touch me, hold my arm or hug me. So that was like really a very emotional moment for me, but I think for everyone else as well. The same afternoon, all the female employees came to my office with a bottle of Prosecco and said, we want to toast to our new female CEO. So that was nice too. And they also said, because in the morning when I talked to them, I also had told them, look, I know that this might feel uncomfortable for some of you, and especially the female colleagues might feel uncomfortable if they have to share the bathroom with me. I do not want to push this on anyone. We have 2 bathrooms for women on the floor, and I can tell you just I will use that one only. So if you feel uncomfortable, just go to the other one, and you don't have to fear of meeting me. And in the afternoon, when they came to my office, they told me, and you just forget about what you said this morning. You go to any bathroom which is closer because we don't have a problem with that. And I think that was very important for me to give them the option and then the permission to tell me, no, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Instead of just giving a directive, this is the way it is going to be. And yeah. In the individual conversations, I had a lot of amazing conversations in respect that I always say they were almost like a gift, because I mean when you go into this and you open yourself up, you make yourself vulnerable. But this vulnerability creates a room where vulnerability is okay. And what happened was that in a lot of conversations, when I opened up and showed myself vulnerable, my opposite started to tell me things about their lives that they do not share at work as well. So I got back a lot of sharing from the other side as well. And that was like really showing me that letting go of my shame and being vulnerable was actually the good thing, the right thing to do. And it was actually also a good thing for the person that was sitting in front of me.
Wow.
On the work side, or the customer side, that was also a place where I was a little bit nervous too, because Baloise Liechtenstein's main clientele is in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland and in Italy. And Italy is, when it comes to LGBT IQ issues, let's say a little bit more conservative. So I was a little bit nervous. I did not want to make the life of my salespeople in that market harder. So when I actually transitioned, we sent out the press communique that was also sent out in Liechtenstein with a photo and with a little email note informing them, the partners, and there too we received quite a number of very nice, encouraging emails, wishing me all the best and congratulating me to my step. And there was only one insurance broker in Liechtenstein who wrote back to the salesperson that was responsible for him if this was a late April Fool's joke. And then he had to, like my salesperson, then had to get back to him and tell him, no, this is actually happening, and you will meet her very soon. So that was very good. And we also went then with my salespeople. I went to visit the most important partners in the following months, and that was also a good experience. And the sales people sometimes came back to me and told me that when they met the partners afterwards, they said they were relieved that they hadn't made any mistakes in addressing me with the right pronouns and saying the right name, etc. So all in all, a very good and a very nice experience, and I always like to think that when you go out to people with an open heart, you also touch their hearts, and then you get that back as well.
As a gay man, I have a lot of opportunities to hide myself in the workplace or even in society. But as a trans person, you were and you are not able to hide. What are your thoughts on this, and how did you imagine coming out in the right gender?
It's true. And that is, I think, a big difference between a gay person and a transgender person. I did get some feedback that people had seen already something, that I had almost no hair on my arms, or that I had very, very fine lines above my eyes. So even before I transitioned, there were some clues, but it's true. I mean, when you transition or come out, it's an all or nothing game when you are transgender. I had and I think that's something that I have common with a lot of transgender people, that we have had some places where we could already be our female selves or our gender identity selves in an environment of trust, or maybe away from our regular lives. I had traveled, like, already before my transition, for the last 7 years. I had traveled to far away places, went to London, to Paris, to Hamburg, to Berlin, and then spent a long weekend there, already living as Angela, and then going back. And so I already had time to get used to be also visible outside, because that I think that for me it was very important that when I actually then transitioned in my official life, I already had developed a very self-secure personality as Angela, and I did not have any thoughts about do I look good enough? Am I passing? I had already lived for 7 years, at least on weekends, as Angela.
To make a transition work well in in a corporate, I think that there are two sides to look at. It's the side of the transgender person, and also to look, what can employers do. What would you recommend transgender people for their coming out? What's your advice to them to have a successful coming out and transition in the workplace?
The first thing, and I know that's not easy, but I think the most important thing is that you are very sure of yourself, of your gender identity, clear and accepting yourself, because I think it is very important that you go to employer as someone with a plan, than someone who feels more like I'm a victim of my circumstances and I need help. Because if you are coming with a plan, you help your employer because you already have a plan, and also you put yourself in a stronger position than when you go there as I'm a victim of circumstances and I need your help. Please help me, because then you put yourself also fully in the hands of the employer, and then if you have an HR person who is an action person, you maybe accept actions that are not good for you, or in the afterwards turn out to maybe have been too fast or not really thought out. And so I think it is very important that you are secure, that you have a plan, and that you also are in charge of the execution of that plan. That does not mean in charge that no one else has anything to contribute. I think it is very important to involve your environment in this transition. I use something that I learned actually in organizational development. There's something that comes out of Blue Ocean strategy, which is called fair process, and fair process means you involve people, you make them part of the solution, you share what is the thing that needs to be changed or needs to be done, and then you also get their feedbacks and you answer their questions, and you make them part of the journey, and not just guests, but really part of the journey. And I also got a very good tip from a coach colleague, who told me you have to beware the senior executives, because there's a breed of senior executives that is used to have all the answers to all the questions, even if they don't know the answer. They have the answer to all the questions, and they have very a lot of difficulty managing their own uncertainty, and they cope with it by doing something. So when you go to senior management, you have to have a plan, and you also have to give them a role on how they can contribute to that plan, because then they don't feel helpless, and they don't just have to make a decision so that they have made a decision.
I'm not a trans person, and but I think I can slightly understand what transgender people go through. But I sometimes have to experience that trans people who come out at work want to happen things too fast. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that too. I mean, I said I had my first conversation at work on May 9th. I had those 150 people I talked to between May 9th and the beginning of August. And my first day at work as Angela was on September 1st. So I had really a long time. And the date, actually the 1st of September, was something that I discussed and agreed on with my employees in Liechtenstein. Because when I started in May, I only said in the second half of 2014, I want to transition at work. I didn't set a specific date because I did not know how long it will take me to have the conversations. And when I started the conversations, the people that knew started to pressure me, don't let us wait too long for actually seeing you as Angela at work. And I have seen some examples. There was also a documentary on Swiss television where there were some very good stories about transgender people, but there was also like a reenacted coming out of a transgender person who was a bus driver, and she went already as her gender identity self, went to her boss and said, from tomorrow on, I will come to work as me. And I thought, I always, and that has been my philosophy all the time, is when I make this change, which is a very big change for me, it is also a huge change for everyone else around me as well, because I have had many years to like approach this and prepare myself for that. I had made a plan and I knew what to say, but the people that I confronted with this information, they needed time to digest that. And of those 150 people I talked to, there were 2 that told me, I already know a transgender person. For everyone else, I was the first person they met that was transgender. Until then, everything they knew about transgender, they knew from the Bild and Blick in Switzerland, or from RTL Reportage, or which is also, I think we can agree on that, not the real life, or for all transgender people. And they also had a lot of questions. And for with many people that I had conversations, they came back to me like a week or 2 after and said, now that I have had time to think about it, I have a few questions. Do you have a few more, half an hour or a little bit more time to discuss them? And then we talked about those questions, and I tried to answer them as openly and fully as possible, because that was for them also the process to digest and to embrace this new information. And I think that was very important also for my success, that by the time I really came to work as Angela on September 1st, they had already really accepted and embraced that, and they were actually looking forward to it.
What are the most important aspects that you think an employer can focus on in order to support the transition of employees?
We have worked together when the Transgender Network Switzerland worked on information documents, leaflets for employers, and there was also a push to create a standard policy for that companies can adopt. And you know that I then opposed that. I do think it's good when employers manifest their engagement and their position, that they do embrace diversity of all kinds. That is not just LGBT IQ, but that is all kinds of diversity. And I think today I think it's even good to have kind of like a policy or a manual, but it needs to be something that is how shall I put that? Needs to be flexible enough. It cannot be like step 1, step 2, step 3, because we are diverse. Even trans people are diverse too. Not every person needs the same things, and I think it should be the transition process. It will be different for every person, and it needs to be a co-creation between employer and trans person. And so hopefully those manuals or policies are more like a menu, where you think those are the things that are important to me, that I would like to use out of this menu, and those are things that I don't think are important to me, and let's not do that.
So hopefully, since people are now moving into agile working, they can use the manual, in kind of sort of working agile on a transition and do whatever is needed in the moment.
Yeah.
Employers very much focus on rules and regulations and transitions, and I think they sometimes miss. And I think, well, it's important to, get the person in the HR system, basically, the new person. But I think it's also very important to focus on the humans and on the teams to support them in the journey of the transition of the person.
Absolutely, exactly. Yeah.
My lunch talks were invented because we decided that this year will be the overall topic of PROUT work will be role models, and so my final question 7, I have to come to role models as well. Do you have or had a role model or mentor in your career?
I in my career I had many role models, but not when it comes to transgender. Actually, when I knew it's time to transition, I actually had to go look for role models, or I didn't think in the words of role model at that point. I contacted the Transgender Network Switzerland and went to their walk-in help point in Zurich, and asked for do you know any trans women who also have been in a senior or in a management position or a senior executive position at the time of their transition, so that I maybe can contact them and talk to them and see how they approached it, what they did, and they gave me 3 names, which I then contacted, and I met them for lunch or for a walk some afternoon, and I just listened to their stories and what they did, and then I took from them what I think I could use, and also what I also asked for from the Help Point was a psychotherapist that has experiences with transgender transitions, and they gave me also a few names, and I picked one and contacted her, and she was basically also my coach during, where I can like prepare, this is what I have planned to say in this conversation, and she would give me feedback, also like how do I approach the conversation with my father, etc. So I think that like it was this combination that was very helpful. I did not do any copy of a transition of the 3 women I talked to. I did kind of a mix of the best of that I saw in those stories that they told me.
And you don't have to share any details, but those 3 women were on a similar level like you.
2 were in a like more in a regular management level, like team leader situation. One was actually even a founder and then chairman of a company, of a startup in Switzerland, and very successful. And she did it very differently than what I did. I mean, I stayed at work, I stayed in the same job. She took a time out and then came back, which is a very different way to do this than what I did.
Yeah.
But still from the level of visibility, she was still the most comparable to what I was facing. Yeah.
But as far as I know, there are more and more trans people in quite senior positions nowadays, and that's
true.
Very good.
It's amazing how, I mean, for me now 2014 is like a life away, and in 2014 I really had to go look for the examples. Today the visibility and also the stories are much more openly open and visible, and it has changed a lot in Switzerland, in Germany, all over, not all over the world, unfortunately, but at least in the, let's say, in the Western Hemisphere, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. For our visitors out there, we have the first questions coming in, but if you have questions, feel free to post them via the Q&A button, because I'm nearly at the end of my questions, and I'm sure we have some time to answer your questions as well. Angela, through your public sharing of your identity, you also are basically a role model, and you act as a role model for young trans people. Maybe not only young trans people, for trans people, in the process of their coming out. What do you think makes a role model?
I think the most important thing that makes a role model is visibility, and then also I think role model in the LGBT IQ environment. I think role models are twofold. On one hand, it's hopefully encouraging people of the community to embrace their authentic self, to see what is possible, and also hopefully see the energy that is freed up through that. And for society, and especially employers, also seeing us, being visible to them, seeing that we are part of society, of the workforce, and especially, I think that is an experience not unique to me, but to everyone who came out, how much more we can contribute when we do not have to hide ourselves. And hopefully that is not just a learning for LGBT IQ, but for diversity as a whole. Is if I have to conform to something I am not, that means, and I only realized that when I came out and was able and did transition, is how much energy I had used before to hide that part of me, or to not live that part of me at work. And suddenly I did not have to hold back anymore. I could be my full self. And I do think employers who have experienced this can confirm that from people that did come out and live their authentic self, they get so much more. They get so much more energy, so much more effort at work, so much more also engagement. And that alone should be for employers be a huge incentive to create a very open and diverse environment.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think role models and visibility are important to achieve equal opportunities for our community?
Because it always starts with a few. If you want to create a movement, you cannot have a movement where everyone starts the movement at the same time. Usually a movement, it starts with maybe sometimes one person who then is able to engage a larger group of people, and then a larger group of people, etc. And so role models are important to get the movement going. And I think we have come a long way, especially when it comes to transgender issues in the last 10 years for that.
Yeah. Now, I think I come to a couple of the questions which came from the audience. Harald, a partner from KPMG, is asking, Angela, you recommended to give senior managers a role in connection with your transition at work. Can you give an example of such a role?
Yes. What I did when I talked to the CEO and to the head of HR, I said, I have an idea of how I want to have individual conversations, but there is also the larger communication inside the company and outside the company. And I do not want to do this myself or dictate that myself. I want to do this together with you. I want to create like a communication plan together with you. It is very important for me that you give me your inputs, how you think the communication inside and outside the company should happen. That was like the biggest thing that I talked to them about, and that worked quite well.
We have a question from an anonymous attendee. Do you believe that you would have had the same experience if you would not have been the CEO at your company at the time you transitioned?
those are always the difficult questions, the what if questions. I do think the CEO position was not the most important aspect for it being successful. I think the most important, an important aspect is that at that point I had been with the company for 30 years. And I had a very good and a very strong network inside the company, which of course then also created support and goodwill. I asked myself, and the CEO then told me, no, we would treat everyone the same. But I asked myself, what if an employee who only had joined like a year or 2 years ago would come to his boss or her boss and tell her the same story? Would she or he get the same support? So I think the difference, is more the seniority in the company, and that I see as could have made a difference, and not the role that I had. I think the role actually, but that was my personal view, was made it more delicate because it's more visible. If you are the same amount of years in the accounting department at the headquarter, even like for seniority on a similar level, it's not so visible to the outside than when you are the CEO of a subsidiary of the group that is also representing the company in the country and in the market to the outside.
Then we have a quite work-related question. There's someone who works as a consultant in the sector of knowledge transfer, and she's been wondering whether biases against LGBT people make knowledge transfer in companies more difficult. She gets from your talk or from our talk that you've been welcomed with open arms, and she supposes transferring knowledge to your employees has not been a problem at all. But have you ever heard about other experiences?
Now it would be interesting to ask, does she mean knowledge about trans identity or knowledge in general? I think when it comes to talk about LGBT issues or transgender or trans identity issues, I think the most important thing is that you communicate openness to answer questions, to take questions seriously. I answered almost all the questions that were like, I sometimes maybe said, oh, that's a little bit too personal. I did not talk about my sex life, for example, even though people were curious about that. But everything else, I think, is okay. Even questions about is your intention to get an operation as well, or things like that. Some people find that offensive too. But I also, as I said, when from 150 people, 148, you are the first like real life transgender person sitting in front of them, and they know nothing about the topic. Then the best thing you can do for them is answer all their questions as good as you can and as openly as you can. And the more open that you are, that was my experience in all my talks that I gave and conversations I had, the more questions come and the better people are informed afterwards.
And now we have an addition or some more information from this person. She was asking about, normal work-related knowledge you have to transfer, and
I did not feel any impact. Actually, the the novelty of me coming to work as Angela was gone like after 2 weeks. And then we just returned to work as normal, and my life also turned quite normal when the novelty was gone.
Excellent. And one last question I take. Confrontation with one's past before transition might be a burdensome thing for a person. In a company, it seems having a history is unavoidable. For example, a dead name in the company's documentation. How could employers be supportive in this context?
If that is important to you. I usually had to laugh, because in Liechtenstein I had before I went to Liechtenstein, when I was in Baloise, I was also for some years I was responsible for the life insurance business in Switzerland. And I had actually made contracts with Baloise Life Liechtenstein for selling their products in Switzerland, and also some service agreements I had signed with them, and when I was in Liechtenstein, I sometimes came across those contracts that I had previously signed as my male with my male identity self. And those contracts were very well negotiated from the group point of view, but sometimes not so favorable for Liechtenstein. And I sometimes cursed about my former self who had signed those contracts that I now, in my new self, had to execute. But I think that is very, very individual, like the feeling, how important is that to you? I have no difficulty seeing my old signature on old documents. I do have a history, and I do not negate that history. What I did do is that because Google is sometimes a little bit too intelligent, so that when you look when you look up my name on the internet for a long time, you also got a lot of picture of my former self, even though you said I'm looking for Angela Matthes, and so I did take some time when I to look myself up, and then when I found pictures of me on websites that had old articles, I contacted that newspaper or that organization and told them, look, I don't care if the article is still online, because it happened then, and that was my identity then. But I would be very happy if you would delete the photo, so that when people look up articles or look me up, then they do not see like half of my new self pictures and half of my old self pictures, things like that.
You seem to have a very pragmatic way to deal with it, and I would say, and that makes it quite easy for your opposites, basically.
Yeah. I think it has to do with what I said before. I mean, it's not just a change for me; it is for everyone else around me too. And to be too strict and too demanding of now because I finally changed, all the world has to change as well. Is to me, it feels a little bit too self-important.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we are really running out of time. Actually, we already have used more of the time we agreed on, Angela. I guess all of you out there Angela is, and for me, she is an inspiring, outstanding person. And I hope you all could take a lot home from the thoughts she's shared. Angela, thank you very much. It was, for me, again, a great pleasure to have this talk with you. It was really lovely.
For me here. Thank you. Next time, again, in German.
Whatever you like. I feel too uncomfy doing it in English because you made it quite easy for me. Yeah, for the audience out there, the video of today's talk will be available to watch through YouTube, through our YouTube channel from tomorrow on. So please follow our YouTube channel as well and our social media channels to not miss any of our events, like our next lunch talk in about 4 weeks' time, because in 2 weeks' time we will publish our PROUT performer lists, and so we decided not to have a lunch talk, but 2 weeks after, on June 22nd, we will have our next lunch talk with Nico Hoffmann from UFA, a very interesting and inspiring guy as well. What we also invite you to prepare yourself for Pride Day Germany if you haven't done so, on July 22nd. And that's all from my side for today. All the best and goodbye.